Welcome to the Gender in Focus podcast. I'm Elle, and each week I get to ask Kai Scott, the president of Transfocus Consulting, all the questions you have ever wanted to ask about trans and non-binary people in the workplace and in the wider world.
What has given me hope is that we're connecting with one another. So, in the face of some pushback or pullback, I have seen communities coming together to support one another, allies showing up in very real and tangible ways.
There's often a little bit of a surprise of how simple allyship can be, and especially when you see all of this huge sort of mass onslaught of some really tough stuff going on at the moment.
Yeah.
The allyship is actually quite small. The day-to-day stuff is the thing that really makes an impact.
Today we're closing out 2025 together, acknowledging year with its challenges, but also real steps forward, renewed connections, a collective push to focus, and new openings for allies to show up in meaningful ways. And despite the noise, the broader picture remains encouraging. We delve into this episode interesting results from a recent survey of 5,600 workers in Canada about how they view EDI. Progress is cyclical, but it's still moving. Now, to help make sense of this year's patterns and possibilities, Elle, let's bring you in. How are you doing? Hello.
I'm doing so well. How are you doing?
I'm also doing well. Yeah, it's exciting to talk about 2025 and what it entailed and what we're looking forward to coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 2025 has been a pretty tough year. I think we can I think we can agree with that.
Oh yeah.
And so I guess that's a good place to start, is what are we looking at in 2025 and what's happened? That's such a massive question, so I'm not expecting you to reel off every single thing that's happened, but just sort of like what we've been facing, what we've looked at, and also what has kept you hopeful through all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. It 2025 has been real.
Right.
We've like really gone into it, and for me, yeah, there have been real shifts, right? Especially we think compared to last year, yeah, things were very different. People have been taking another look at equity, diversity, inclusion more generally, and wondering how that fits, especially within a corporate context. Uh, People have asked questions about what it means, what are they responsible for, and people have been backing off of some aspects of EDI, and also when we talk about trans and non-binary issues specifically, they have become a political flashpoint.
Right.
Certainly in the US, but also in Canada and other parts of the world, there have been real pushback on trans and non-binary progress. That can be in the form of anti-trans legislation, whether proposed or enacted. It can come in questionable research that has been conducted without the involvement of trans and non-binary folks. It can, yeah, there's so many different ways. I don't want to list them all because it can feel very heavy to look at it in totality,
Right.
where you're like, oh yeah, tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all that to say, and I will say with trans focus too, we've observed shifts in how people engage in the work that we do. For example, there's still focus on kind of strategic advice and changing things from a structural standpoint, but it's gone a little bit quieter on the educational front, right? As just
Right.
one example of that. I think more here in Canada, it's about a wait and see. People are a little hesitant, or
Right.
not even people, just companies are like, okay, what's happening? Let's hold off a bit. But things have been kind of picking up again too. So it's interesting. Once uncertainties are clarified, then people are back, right? Or companies. What has given me hope is that we're connecting with one another. So, in the face of some pushback or pullback, I have seen communities coming together to support one another, allies showing up in very real and tangible ways. One example is in Alberta. There's a few things happening, which we don't need to go into all the detail.
Right.
Maybe that's another episode. But I've been really encouraged by bishops from several Christian denominations showing up in real tangible ways. They wrote a letter saying this is not a Christian approach. We don't
Hmm.
agree with the pushback and backlash on our trans siblings. And I was like, holy smokes, this is amazing.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
just one example. So it's really encouraging to see people show up, and
Hmm.
want to be working together towards a better future for everyone.
That story about the bishops is so moving because it's sort of not what you would expect, almost, not to
Mhm.
say that we have like assumptions or we shouldn't be making assumptions, but
Right.
it's also true that when we think of allies, we don't necessarily go to the church for
Mm,
that, maybe initially, but it's
yeah.
such a great example of how, one, assumptions are wrong, and you can
Mhm.
find allies and community and connection anywhere that
Yeah.
if you want to, if you look for it, and two, that people are showing up in real tangible ways, that they have
Mm,
a real impact on the community, that are facing some really tough times at the moment. And that's
mm,
kind of my next question: is this specific moment is quite a key time for people to show up and actually
yeah.
really put their allyship into action. And so what does that look like in practical terms on a sort of day-to-day
Right.
basis?
Right, right. Yeah, it's so important. And I know in talking to allies, they feel that. They feel
Mm,
that, okay, I see all these really grim news stories
right.
and I feel compelled and a strong desire to contribute. And then
Mm,
the question is like, okay, how and when and where? And, is it my place? And, maybe there's a
absolutely.
little bit of a chatter in the head to say,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
um, and maybe a hesitation to
Mm,
show up specifically. Um, but it is still really important. And I think people start to realize, okay, there's been progress, but that progress is not guaranteed. And so, trans and non binary folks, along with allies, showing up to kind of hold the line for now and then continuing to expand it uh, in many different areas. And the ways that showing up look like depends on the individual. Usually people have a set of gifts or skills that they're really good at. One thing I've encouraged a friend who's really good at writing, I was like, right now we just need a lot of content out there explaining and counteracting some of the mis and disinformation about
mhm,
trans and non-binary folks. So you could lend your skills to any number of organizations that, especially nonprofits, don't have a huge budget for that type of
mhm.
work and would love to have people helping with writing, right? So
Right.
it
Yeah.
seems kind of basic, but it's actually a big deal because writing and
Mhm,
communicating is like one of the biggest ways that can really lend to the effort. If people don't have any specific skills that they can think of that could help, of course, donations are a big deal right now.
mhm,
There's a lot of legal action happening and supporting various legal organizations that are at the forefront of fighting the anti trans laws, either after the fact that they've been implemented to question their constitutionality or
mhm,
um, we have folks, thankfully, like Chase Strangio, who are going to the Supreme Court as a trans person to fight for trans rights. And but of course, that needs support.
right.
There's so many other ways. The everyday piece, if you do know somebody in your life who is trans and non-binary, is just to check in with them, see how they're doing. You don't have to assume that they're kind of down and out, even though many are.
Mhm,
But just be like, hey, want to go grab coffee, want to talk, and then just wherever they want to go with what they want to share is a really beautiful way to show up for somebody and to let them know you're in their corner and you're
mhm,
doing these things maybe on your own, of your own accord. But also, if they need anything specifically, then you're there and all ears kind of thing. And then this seems really basic, and I know we probably repeat it a lot, but it does bear some mention. If you know somebody's name and pronoun, using it. And sometimes that means practicing it, but that makes such a big deal in this vast land of misgendering that's happening for trans and
Mm.
non-binary folks, whether specifically or more broadly. So that can make a huge difference. And you model for others how to respectfully treat trans people.
One of the things that I've noticed in having conversations with people is that there's often a little bit of a surprise of how simple allyship can be, and especially when you see all of this huge
Mm.
um, sort of mass onslaught of some really tough stuff going on at the moment.
Yeah.
That the allyship is actually quite small. We're not expecting you to go and, I don't know, break into. Wait, hang on. Where am I going? Where am I going
Yeah,
with that?
where are we breaking
Wait,
into? Elle's leading
I
a
was going to say
revolution.
Alberta legislature. No, we're not expecting anything huge. Like the day to day stuff is the thing that really makes an impact on
Mm,
people. And like even just I don't know, like a really great example is my friend cooked a meal,
mm,
an extra portion, and packaged it up and gave it to my other friend
oh,
who is trans and just was feeling really heavy. There's a lot going on in Alberta and was
mm,
just feeling really rough. And it was like such a tiny act that was
mhm.
like, oh, I'm loved. Like
Yeah,
it's it's people have my back, and I think that's like a really important thing, is the people in your life who are trans or non-binary knowing that you have their back
mhm.
is really important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get not articles per se, but just, people in my life saying, I think this is utter garbage, what's happening, or, whatever, however they want to express it. Um,
Hmm.
and, I'm really upset. And so just kind of reflecting, obviously not kind of dumping on that person, but just
Right.
a few notes to say, you're paying attention.
Mm.
Because oftentimes trans and non-binary folks, especially in places of despair, and I certainly have gone there, especially in the
Yeah.
past, it's just like, oh, I'm all alone. Trans people are kind of left out in the open ocean to defend themselves. And
Right.
if there's
Yeah.
a sense that people are paying attention, that they're affected by what's happening, and in some cases being vocal about that, depending on the context and when it makes sense and what kind of influence somebody has. But that can make a big deal. And I also appreciate sometimes these small gestures that you're talking about, these like moments of care are very
Hmm.
powerful, and where you don't even have to connect it, be like, because you're having, because the world is against you right now, I'm making you this lasagna. It's just more like,
Right.
no, I care for you and I want you, want the
To
best for
feel that.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also appreciate sometimes when people send joyful, or maybe it doesn't have
Mm.
to be joyful, but like positive content too, to be like, "Ooh, I read this really interesting article where they were talking about trans vis-a-vis freedom,
Mm.
self-determination, and I found this thing to be really interesting." I recently had my mom send like a conversation among trans folks, and she then picked out what she appreciated and liked, right? So I like that. Just like,
Oh,
this is
that's so cute.
content that you might enjoy.
Your, your mom's breaking my heart.
My mom is pretty awesome. Yeah,
That's
it's
sweet.
makes a big deal
Hmm.
to know that, one, there's attention on the negative stuff, but there's also room for the positive too.
Hmm. Yeah. Something that you've said a lot recently is a big focus that you've had is on making things simpler and
Mm,
sort of simplifying things, especially when things are feeling heavy.
yeah.
And I was wondering what your thoughts were on how that applies to sort of inclusion work and allyship more generally.
Yeah. So when it comes to trans and non-binary inclusion, I've been really listening carefully, and that's the whole range of things, where people are super supportive and ready to go and involved, to even kind of on the more negative side of things, where, as you know, because you're there handling those comments, there's something there, right?
Mm,
And there's kind of this undercurrent that, if we can, better uh, kind of understand or realize, then I think we can, there's a way forward with that. And
mm,
so I've been thinking about a lot of that. There's an opportunity to reset. So there's a lot that's already been done, and for some folks, they don't fully understand what that change entails, to have greater inclusion of trans and non-binary folks. And for some, it can feel even threatening, right? And so there is an opportunity, even though it's unfortunate that it has come to a backlash,
Mhm.
and sometimes such a severe backlash,
Mhm.
that there but in that moment of darkness, I think there's also a bit of light, and that's where I'm focused is okay, eh, how can we kind of go back to not just basics, because of course many people have already learned a lot of the basics, but
Mhm.
it's how do we kind of fold in the things that are important to a variety of different folks,
Mhm.
and as a way to show this is something that is helpful and beneficial to everyone, um, obviously particularly for trans and non-binary folks, but hopefully to show that it's not a threatening thing, that it's
Mhm.
actually a really powerful thing for kind of human evolution or actualization, whatever you want to call it, that there's something there. So, but I think
Mhm.
simplifying it is a key to making that possible, because maybe and I'll claim this, right? Like how we've explained things, especially in the past. If I think about, we were just about to celebrate 10 years, and I looked back to some of the original content, and, it was a little complicated,
Well,
you know?
Transfocus is 10 years old. And oh right, sorry, I'm
Right.
with you. So the stuff you were saying before was complex?
Yes. Yeah.
Was it? Really?
Well, you're starting out and you're like, okay, all
Sure.
these things need to be known right now, download
Mhm.
immediately. Uh, but it's a lot. And a lot of what we have learned as pacing is it's just
Mm.
like a proper sequencing that's measured and is like an enjoyable learning experience, rather than kind of being pummeled with a bunch of stuff that's like, whoa, totally overwhelming. It's hard to figure out where things are at and situate them. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll humbly admit that, we had a lot more academic terms, some big words, and people are like, oh, I don't know what that means. And,
Right.
or maybe they initially understand and then immediately forget, because it's how our brains work.
Mhm.
So, we've learned a lot in the 10 years that we've been operating, a lot from feedback from folks,
Mhm.
because they're like, "Hey, this doesn't work for me," and then we're able to adjust. And so really value that input to make things better.
Mm. So with that backlash that we've been seeing, and it's quite easy to, well, I'll speak for myself. It can be quite easy to lose hope sometimes, and it's you've laid out a lot of positives too, but sort of on when you're reading the news and it's sort
Mhm.
of news article after news article, legislation after legislation, it can be really
Yeah.
tough to stay positive. Um, but could you go into what we're actually seeing? Well, at least in Canada, what we're
Mhm.
seeing amongst individuals and how I think you told me that there's still quite a big support for EDI work
Mhm.
in general.
Yeah. And that's part of the encouragement is, yeah, when you look at news, it's easy to
Mm,
despair. And I think it's important to acknowledge that despair too. It's not like
hmm
something bad, or like we shouldn't be that way. It's very human to be like, holy crap, what the heck?
hmm
Like,
Yeah,
and to feel it. Obviously feeling despair all the time is debilitating. And so,
sure.
like with measure, to everybody has their own way of measuring what amount of news they're able to consume without
hmm
becoming overwhelmed, and that's a journey for everybody to figure out. But I think there's some place for grieving and
mm,
being mad and upset, or whatever corresponding feeling. And that said, also to not lose sight of the positives, because there
mm,
are a lot. This one study that you're saying that happened in, I think it was April or March of this year, the Diversity Institute surveyed, I think it was 5,600 workers in Canada, so across Canada, to get their views on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it's more broad than gender
Mm.
diversity, but it's helpful to kind of see where are folks at, what's happening,
Mm. Yeah,
because
of
if you
course.
look at the news, you could assume that people are just thumbs down on EDI,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So it's good to get a few reality checks of that. Yeah, there is majority support for EDI in Canada, and that's, I think, important to not lose sight of. If
Hmm.
there are people who are unsupportive, it's actually about being neutral, not against. So I
Mm.
think that's an important distinction as well.
Yeah,
People can
absolutely.
often, yeah, it's like you can only see it in a binary rather than a spectrum.
Mm.
And that neutrality, I think, is important because people just have lost touch. And so
Yeah.
I think involving them more, bringing them in, seeing where they're at with the topic, and continuing the dialogue is so important.
Hmm.
When there is opposition to EDI, it's actually about economic uncertainty, and I think
Right.
that's key. So
Yeah.
I think that we need to think about how to involve folks who are struggling to get by. That's a
Hmm.
real thing, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
so I think there's a degree of compassion, as at least for me. Everybody can
Hmm.
choose their own. Um, and then another aspect, I'm just trying to think of, there's so many different aspects to this study, and just wanted to give a few highlights, and then we'll put the link in the show notes so you can
Hmm.
read further. Um, but then there was also that opposition never exceeded 15%. So it's a really low
Really?
opposition, right?
Oh my goodness, that's surprise. I don't know why that
Yeah,
surprises me. I
yeah,
think maybe because there is so much noise about the sort of like the pushback that actually it's such a small amount.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And very vocal. That's,
Hmm. Yeah.
especially on social media or even in the media more broadly. If you're loud, you get attention.
Mm.
Um, but I think there's an opportunity for something quieter to happen that'll be stronger and more sustainable. Working with people who are in active support of EDI, as well as folks who are a little bit more neutral or just they don't
Hmm.
really fully understand it yet. And so
Hmm.
that's where I gained so much hope. I'm like, oh my gosh, this
Mm.
is
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, let's do it. There are different sectors that have different levels. So nonprofit is a place where there's particular big support for
Yeah,
EDI,
of course.
big hearts. I get it,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, and yeah, the only other thing I'll say is that there is some degree of opposition or a little bit higher opposition among older men. So I think there's something there to explore.
Mm.
And that's where I'm curious, and,
Hmm.
I'll be thinking about that and extending things to understand better. And I'm curious to hear from listeners as well if they have any thoughts on the matter. So just a few highlights, and I encourage you to read the whole report. And of course, very thankful to the Diversity Institute. I think there were a few other organizations like Future Skills Center that were involved. So yeah,
Hmm.
always grateful for data for a good reality
Yeah.
check.
Yes. Oh, that's really encouraging. I'm so glad to hear that.
Mhm.
You said something in the beginning, and I just wanted to kind of close off on this,
Mm.
which is that you mentioned about the cyclical nature of progress
Mm.
and how really those setbacks that we might be looking at don't erase the entire sort of forward momentum that we've had overall. And so I was wondering, yeah, if you could close up with some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And I've got to give credit. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates who inspired this thought with a recent interview with Ezra Klein. And he reminded me he draws a lot of strength from intergenerational action. He's
Mm.
looking to his ancestors, especially in the Black Civil Rights Movement and all the work that was, done, a lot of gains, a lot of pushing back. This was not one and done, and he's pushing it forward a little bit more, or a lot more in many cases, and then he's looking to the future generation to continue. And so when I think about it from like an intergenerational, and this is also something that Indigenous people often think about in terms of 7 generations, right? So if you get time scale, it's easier to get a perspective that, and kind of see the patterns of things that happen, and almost be able to anticipate them rather than
Mm.
kind of reel from them. It's
Right.
like, okay, we're in a backlash, right? And if because things are cyclical, I can now look forward to and work towards, along with everyone else, towards that next part of the positive cycle,
Hmm.
and then also be planning in the positive cycle for possibility of a backlash, right? So just always have it
Absolutely.
kind of built in. So yeah.
Hmm. And that those positive cycles that come forward only exist because people don't lose momentum during the
Oh my
pushbacks.
gosh, such a good
So,
point. Yeah, to not lose sight, eye on the prize, as
hmm.
the PBS special on the civil rights movement talked about. Such a powerful, and I think there's a song also about that, and it's so true on so many fronts. And so
Hmm.
just yeah, it can be easy to lose sight of that. And so I do
Hmm.
understand if people do that. And then also, as soon as you're able to get back up, it's important. The momentum is key, and we're doing it for ourselves, but also for future generations, because we there's almost a sense of owing it to them, not in this like
Hmm.
high pressure down on
Yeah.
yourself if you don't, but just more like I feel inspired to
Hmm.
set things up in that way for others.
Absolutely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kai. And
Mm,
let's hope 2026 is looking bright. And thank you for a great 2025.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you as well. And it was really good. I want to reflect briefly in closing, the fact that we've done this podcast for 1 year as well.
A
And I
whole
think,
year.
of course, big, huge thank you to Elle for all the work that you do. Much more behind the scenes that many of you may not see, but they make the magic happen. Let's say that. So big kudos. And of course, looking forward to much more in 2026 with this podcast and so many other things. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kai.
Okay.
See you.
Bye for now.
Bye.